There's something. All right, so we're gonna get started. So for the purposes of the recording, and I'd like to thank everybody for joining us. My name is Tom Brennan. I've been involved in the technology committee here now for about a year or so. Have helped out in a couple different ways with the committee itself, and I'm certainly interested in seeing more businesses come to Morris County that are in the technology space. I spent a lot of my time trying to help promote that aspect of it. Today we're going to talk a little about understanding where hackers strike and how to secure your business. From my perspective, as was introduced earlier, I've been in this space for 20 years, worked for organizations like Intel and Trustwave and a lot of other companies, but I've always been trying to help organizations fight better and be better along the way. I don't spend a lot of time with compliance. I don't spend a lot of time with regulation. I spend a lot of time breaking into things. That's kind of my business focus. Today with me is my business, one of my business partners, Alex Field from Security Scorecard. I'll give you a little background.
How's it going, everyone? My name is Alex Hyde from Security Scorecard. My role there is I'm the Chief Research Officer, so I come up with a lot of the data sets that we use to calculate our security scores. And so my background is I come from the like Tom, I come from the offensive side of the hacking world. Before this, I worked for Security Scorecard. I was a co-founder of the Hack Miami hackerspace down in South Florida. Also did some work with the OWASP Foundation, and I ran the threat intelligence team for the ProX6 cert. And before that, I did application and vulnerability analysis for the financial sector. And what we're doing here at Scorecard is we're essentially mapping out the entire internet, identifying exploitable conditions, and then mapping them back to companies. And we're looking at 10 different categories of attacks, and that's what we'll be going into today.
So we'll be talking a little bit about that. One of the more recent projects I've worked on, I'm one of the technical advisors on this new comic book that's currently now in production. There's also going to be an animated series, which I'm really excited about, like a SpongeBob. And there's opportunities to tell your story as well. What they're doing is they're taking stories from individuals. I'm one of the technical advisors, and sort of that's the technical content, and then it gets pushed over to the illustrators and the graphics people, which is really cool. So it's fun to see, and my son's excited. I'm working on a comic book, so I think that's kind of fun. So kind of as we kick off, kind of intimate, please stop us along the way. But the focus here is really trying to reinforce some of the conversation that Jim had relative to incident response. And there's a lot of great guidance, hopefully, that will come out of this. And I think Jim said it very well. Two particular points. Number one, the prior law enforcement folks, as well as prior military folks like myself, certainly come, I think, from a different mindset of adapt, overcome, figure out, and go. And at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity here. The second thing he mentioned was that, let's not get started on operational technology. Let's not get started on IoT. Well, let's go there, because that's where I spend my time. As we look at sort of the profile, right? We go to the FBI website and we look at who the hacker is. Well, I don't have my hoodie on, but certainly I really think it's all about ethics, right? It's really about the individual and the course they take in their space that they play in. But we continue to have this sort of review of the bad guy. I can't remind people enough that this is the bad guy, right? We are the bad guys. We're the insider threat. If anyone here happens to own a Tesla, you may have heard yesterday that there was an insider that had a big problem in the organization that caused a little bit of sabotage, that caused disruption of software, internal. We also had some CIA leaks that were pushed out yesterday. Some individuals from OPM are now getting arrested. So there's a lot of activity in the space right now. But whether it be good guys, bad guys, or whether you're a badge working for the CIA, or whether you're a badge engineer working for Tesla, or you're a badge person working for the company you work for, sometimes ethics plays a big role. Secondly, clicking on links. Yeah, sure, that's definitely a vector. It's just one vector. Let's dive into a little bit more. So our quick learning objectives for today, we talked a little bit about the speakers, the speaker background. I think you'll have a lot of good conversation with Alex. He has a fantastic wealth of knowledge. I worked with him for a bunch of years, especially with the OWASP stuff. But really the problem here is something we know about, which is the cyber, which is why you're in the room. But for the people that will watch this as a recording, these problems are continuing to evolve. So I'm trying to provide some advanced information in areas you should be more concerned about. Because as an attacker, as an offensive person, I'm done sending custom created malware on email attachments, because people now are utilizing tools and technologies to help filter those areas from being the prominent attack vector. And I'm trying to expose other areas of focus like software security. So, Alex, want to run us through a couple things?
Yeah. So just to kind of start off, the concept of the what is considered the information security model has completely changed over the last few years. So originally you have a fortress model, a company responsible for their own enterprise. They've got their firewalls, they've got their perimeters, and anything going in or out is checked heavily. And then now we have the ecosystem, third-party applications, everything being hosted, different data centers, different service providers, instantly spun up and tore down, and it's basically employees are now empowered with the ability to make their own decisions when it comes to IT, whereas before there was a process that would cause delays, and now it's shifted, and because of which there are vectors of risk that previously didn't exist before, especially since in the fortress model you have the CISO who's responsible for their own domain, but how do you make sure, although you might be sure of your own security, how do you make sure that everyone you're doing business with is up to the same standards? So the main vectors of risk that we have are web application vulnerabilities. So this is what we're looking for at Security Scorecard, but this is also what attackers are looking for as well. So they're looking for web application vulnerabilities, so SQL injections, things like that, network attacks, which are attacks on the infrastructure. One of the biggest ones that we'll be going into a bit as well is leaked and hacked credential use. So over probably the last 3 years, over 8 billion email password combinations have been released into public. Everything from LinkedIn, Dropbox, MySpace, companies we've never heard of, adult dating websites, everywhere. If you've used a service within the last 3 years on the internet, chances are an email and password combination is circulating publicly, and attackers are reusing those to log into things. And then there's the concept of social engineering. So even when the password is changed, oftentimes there's enough information in those data breaches to be able to social engineer the newer one out of you. And then the traditional vectors of malware infections, and then also legacy systems, which is not really focused on enough, but is one of the larger issues of attack. And when we look at the underground ecosystem itself, so who are the different groups that are conducting these attacks? And there's always going to be an overlap of certain groups as well. So we basically broke it down into these 4 groups. We've got the script kiddies, the spammers, and then organized crimes and the advanced persistent threat groups. So yellow being the least malicious but annoying, and then script kiddies being the higher risk, and then you have APT groups and organized crime. And there's always going to be an overlap, because especially as organized crime and ATP groups will hire spammers to send out their stuff, or script kiddies might end up joining one of these groups, or especially an organized crime group as it relates to spam. They all end up overlapping at some point in time.
So let me give you an example that would translate really well here. In mail fraud, in the mail fraud space, particularly, individuals are involved in doing what's called credit card drops, right? They might grab credit cards back in the day from your mailbox, be able to pass cards out, have to go buy stuff, then go drop ship to a local location, and then have them mail to put on eBay or put on Craigslist. That same scenario is sort of the human mule that is being seen more and more as it pertains to the sort of the circle we call script kiddies, right? The conversation here, the derogatory frame or name, is tied to the conversation of me taking a very powerful tool or a very powerful component and giving it to somebody who wants to become a systems analyst, who wants to go through a computer security school, be the first job out of school. I'm going to say, great, so you're going to work from home, you're going to get paid $50,000 a year, and you're going to push a button. I'm going to feed you information to go ahead and provide me with vulnerability data, because these are authorized targets that you're now working for my company. And you're going to go ahead and do assessments, and you're going to find problems, you're going to go ahead and feed that data back to me. That data that you're feeding back to them is the example of a mule. The mules are actually executing and providing security data because that's their first job. And then they're providing that data to organizations that are actually using it for actual monetization. We're seeing that a lot.
And in a way, essentially the cycle of the underground economy. So attackers will usually obtain stolen data through a breach one way or another. They have to monetize it either by using it, selling it, or both. And then they have now they have resources that they have to launder. Cryptocurrency has made this much easier within the last few years. Before cryptocurrency, they would have to use centralized e-currency providers, but most of them have been shut down by the Secret Service by now, places like Liberty Reserve and the like. And now it's cryptocurrency is making it much more difficult because it's decentralized and there's anonymization protocols and the like. And then there's always the end goal of spending it or cashing out, be it for physical assets. And when it comes to what the hacking methodology is, the attackers are, in order to obtain the stolen data, step one, they have to conduct reconnaissance on the network. They have to gain access to the network, maintain that access, and then cover up their tracks. Covering up tracks is a quite important part, but thankfully, a lot of people they will stop short at maintaining access, and that gives a lot of useful information for incident response folks when they're going in to do investigations. And then when we look at the evolution of the hacker, so in the early days, you had essentially hacking tools were quite complicated to use. You had to either write them yourself, and so this kind of just shows how the evolution goes from the script kiddie or neophyte to an elite hacker. But now in modern days, hacking tools are so easy and prolifically available. It's point and click. So a botnet operator can basically purchase botnets, not have any understanding of how the machines came to be infected, but they now control the machines and can exfiltrate the data and use it. And when we look at some of the, so when we talk about databases, how are databases hacked? So databases are, usually they're attacked through things like web application vulnerabilities such as SQL injection, which is an injection on a web application that will execute database commands beyond what was intended.
To give you a simple example there, for those that aren't aware of what SQL injection is at a technical level, you go to any website and there's a search index or a search bar, and you go ahead and put in the search bar like apples, whatever it is you're looking for. The return is a query. The query is, in some cases, using SQL. Something as simple as putting a single tick in may provide a reverse error message, which says this is not a valid query. And that reverse error message would be an indicator that SQL injection is very prominent in that application. The next step there would be to use either well-scripted or well-crafted attack techniques to go ahead and have the database that may have information in it, be able to provide that data back to the attacker. So something that I can hack over a mobile phone at an airport when I'm killing time at an airport is the same methodology and approach that a bad guy uses when he's actually conducting a reconnaissance on your particular application. That's one example.
And SQL injections are the concept that vulnerability has been around for probably over 20 years now. And it still exists because it's a condition that exists from people making coding errors. But things like web application firewalls and the like have made it more difficult to actually carry out these types of attacks successfully. Still very common, still happens. But most of the big data leaks that we've seen over the last 2 years were just straight up copies of misconfigured or unsecured backups or database servers that just had no password. So just directly connecting in, you're not asking for authentication, and now you have the database. Or there will be, sometimes there's a vulnerability that's exploited, or in the instance of the screenshot here, this is from, this is a bit of code that I found on GitHub, where we're finding API keys, database passwords, essentially any authentication credential that really shouldn't be online, you can oftentimes find on GitHub from developers making mistakes.
So again, just to highlight that thing about that, right? In your company, there could be people writing software, right? Custom software within your organization. They may use a repository like GitHub. They may go ahead and save their code to GitHub as an interactive mechanism for multiple developers to work on. And they may be going ahead and hard coding passwords and API keys into the code, which means when people like me look at organizations and try to fingerprint them and figure out what they are doing as a business, and I find that the developers are using open repositories, and I find information in GitHub to this point that provides this data, okay, that's one way I'm going to get in. And the second way I'm going to get in. The third, so you make your attack list as to where your vulnerabilities have been identified. Something as simple as that is easy to police, but it happens all the time.
And what's more, someone logging in with authenticated, legitimate information that's just been obtained from somewhere, that's not really going to set off any firewall rules if they're logging in as intended. And that's opposed to a brute force or something like that. So where do these databases end up before they're circulated in the public? So this is a darknet crypto market, meaning it's a marketplace on the dark web. So this is specifically hosted on the Tor network. And this is called targeted executive disclosures. So it's an invite-only crypto market. They charge about $120,000 deposit just to be able to gain access to the forum.
So it's pay to play for the attacker.
Exactly, pay to play. It's about a six-figure minimum to even see their entire listing, what's for sale. But on their front news page, they give you an idea of what they have. So we have American Eagles outfitter breach, internal access to all a bunch of Israeli websites, bins from the United States, Vodafone breach, including full dump of SharePoint.Vodafone.
Have you heard about the Vodafone breach yet? You're right, you haven't.
And there, we see Goldman Sachs HR database dump, LinkedIn disclosure of 15 executives, intermittent email access, bidding starts at 10,000, and that's the Magic Leap breach, includes employee database and hundreds of confidential accounts. Bidding starts at 150. Bidding starts at 50,000. So that kind of gives an idea of where they are. This is a top shelf marketplace. This is where stuff will end up if it's going to be sold or just used on their own. And then after it's gone through that cycle and all the money's been made out of it and all the data's been squeezed out of it that can be squeezed, it'll usually end up on a public resource. So this is one of many different underground websites. Some of them are on ClearNet, some of them on the Tor network. And this is what you see here is a collection of the compressed archives of every database dump from probably the last 6 or so years. So PlayStation 3 hacks, Patreon dump, Experian, Ashley Madison users, investment bank.ae, LinkedIn, and the list goes on. Stratfor, Comcast. If you can think of a database that's been circulating within the public in the last few years, it's on this site and it's on many others. And
so if you're still using the same password on multiple websites, thank you from the attacker's perspective.
Indeed, again, it won't set off the firewalls. So how are passwords cracked? So sometimes the passwords will just be stored in plain text, so it makes it really easy from the attacker's perspective because you don't have to do any work. But what do you do when the passwords are encrypted? Well, it's not really that difficult. There are many tools available, John the Ripper, Hashcat, others, free to use, and you just load up your list of hashes and a dictionary file, or you could just have it brute force every combination. So what I did here is I took a list of FBI.gov email address and password combinations from the Dropbox breach, and I loaded them up into John the Ripper with a very simple word list of just very simple phrases. So right out of the gates, it cracked several simple passwords: Godzilla, ha ha ha, tennis, Trevor. And the more complicated the password, the more difficult it is to crack. I just chose a small sample for the proof of concept of it. But attackers who are doing this, they have farms of GPU machines, or they'll make use of the Amazon GPU service to get all the processing power needed to be able to crack these hashes.
Or they might be using the OWASP virtual village sitting here in Bridgewater, New Jersey, that I built as a password cracker, and any member of OWASP is able to use the password cracker for research purposes.
It's and the rise of cryptocurrency has greatly assisted password cracking, just because more GPUs are available and people have them to be able to use when they're not doing crypto. And so how are these databases used? So as we talked about, password reuse attacks. So they'll take over accounts that are using the same passwords, but not just for that service. They'll go across the board. They'll check every service that's available, especially if it's a business login. They'll try it on every single login portal available for that business. And also taking over the email account, because once you're in the email account, that's the keys to the kingdom. It just happens, if the password used on a social network happens to manage the work email address, now you can basically start dumping everything.
Let me give you an example too from the attacker's perspective, the bad guy persona, right? So if you have a legitimate Amazon account and you are legitimately buying things, everything online like I do, right? And you don't have two-factor authentication enabled on the Amazon account, when the bad guy logs into your Amazon account, you might be the victim of the account breach, quote unquote, reusing your password. You're not the target. Your target is going to be you posting something on somebody else's review that's going to be embedding components like JavaScript or other tags or other URLs into a review that's then going to drive other eyeballs, other targets to that particular thing. If you're a LinkedIn user and you don't use two-factor authentication, you're foolish. Because the first thing I'm going to do if I'm a bad guy and I really want to mess with you and probably people in your company, is I want to post something as you on your LinkedIn profile with a link that I control. And at that point, when people click on the link, I'm going to own the browsers that are now going to the web application using a tool called Beef that I really love and enjoy. The idea is that I can command and control the application of the users that have clicked on the link. They believe you posted something on your LinkedIn profile.
And just to add to that, so there's very elaborate ways that you can get access to a whole bunch of people's machines through simple password reuse. And these are also used in very low-tech type of attacks where they'll just find the CEO's email account and just start sending emails to the company saying, we need to pay this invoice. And here's the bank account. And all of a sudden, people are just wiring transfers because the CEO told them to. It's just a total social engineering attack. And then we talked about Amazon, and then at the lowest level, some people just want to be able to watch Netflix and Spotify or sell Netflix and Spotify accounts, and that's also a common use. And then also just spam, phishing, and malware, and that goes beyond just email as well. Because if you import a big list of email addresses into a social network, it'll match all the profiles as well. So you no longer need to use email as an actual vector.
Another one that's interesting is Xbox Live accounts. Just to use that as an example if you have kids. Because again, Microsoft is using one authentication across OAuth across all their sites, right? So let's say you happen to give your kid access to your Xbox Live account. Well, in that account gets leaked because your kid talks and he wants to share passwords on his Xbox device. All of a sudden, you get a bill in the mail from Azure with a $50,000 bill. Well, that's because your credit card's linked to the Xbox Live account that was leaked by your kid, and then the IO is being used in Azure, which is all for centralized billing. So it gets real fun when you have these disputes, and then you have to call the company and say, well, I didn't spend $50,000 on Azure Cloud. What is Azure Cloud? And they're like, well, sir, you logged in, you clicked the accept terms and agreement, and you should not be using passwords at a week. It gets into a conversation of how do you get your money back. Good.
Yeah. So yeah, the OWASP Top 10 will actually go over a lot of the in detail the attack vectors that we went through, both technical descriptions, ways to recreate them, and also ways to mitigate them. You want to add anything to that?
Sure. So the OWASP organization is the Open Web Application Security Project, founded in 2001. We got 35,000 members around the world, 220 chapters around the world in 110 countries. New York is probably the biggest chapter that I run, and it's about 3,500 people. Long story short, there's lots of great free resources that are there, checklists, guides, best practices that are available for people to jump on and actually take action with. So all of this scary security stuff becomes, okay, well, here's the problem, here's the solution. Here's the problem, here's the solution. The problem is you have to get to the solution. The issue is that most people don't actually take action on the solutions.
Yeah, and this comment here basically it shows that from the 2017 Verizon Breach Report, blind SQL injection was still one of the remaining top working exploits. We kind of touched on that earlier, and it's just the point that this exploit is over 20 years old and is still ranking within the top. And then when attackers don't need that, they could just log in with no password or a stolen password. It really gives an indication of how far things have gone to the advantage of an attacker.
Just to make it as simple as doing input validation in SQL. When people are making a request or making calls to a database and are taking A through Z, 1 through 9, right, and using that as valid characters, fantastic. With single ticks, quotes, brackets. These aren't part of your business process. Why would the developer be allowing these characters to be traversed through the network, right? That's the issue. Again, 2017, it's still a problem, and we can actually prove that problem by you clicking a single tick in any search box you happen to see when you're on the internet.
Because I mean, the easiest way to describe it is attackers are typing code into boxes on your website, and the code is executing. It shouldn't be.
Hey Tom, aren't there some tools that you can, free tools that you can run and see if you're vulnerable for a SQL injection?
Sure, there's particularly two of them. One is called SQL Map, which we'll touch on. The second one is the OWASP Zap Proxy. So again, tools are available. They're open source. They're not free. But as open source, the licenses allow you to utilize these tools in a way that's meaningful. But keep in mind, open source software still needs to be maintained and updated.
And so we're jumping off of that and kind of going into legacy software, which also can apply to web application software. The Equifax breach, that was a result of the Apache Struts attack. And vulnerable Apache Struts server. And Apache Struts is a Java-based framework that's a few years old, and it's very much used within the financial sector because it's scalable and it's robust for that. But it's also incredibly vulnerable. And a release of several quite effective exploits were weaponized and made available, and they were available for around. They're still being attacked. In fact, they're still being attacked now as one of the main attack vectors, even though the exploit's a few years old. And Equifax is probably the most prominent place that got hit with this, and it's essentially a code injection, a remote code execution attack on an old version of Apache Struts, which is which is used in a lot in the financial sector. But these types of attacks, again, will apply to all web application frameworks.
Keep in mind, this is not a patch. This is not a download a patch and press enter, right? This is an application was written by probably a bunch of team members that created a unique custom application that now, in order to fix the problem, they need to upgrade the underlying fundamental framework of the application. That investment and years of time, if you will, to get from where they were to where they need to be, the organization may be reluctant to do it from a cost perspective, not have the people to do it. They may have outsourced it, like figuring out now who to go to help fix code. That actually has competency in doing security, which is a whole different mindset.
And that's and there's a huge misconception within a lot of developing teams where they will assume that the security protocols that they need are baked into the framework that they're using. They'll say, oh, well, you're using Ruby on Rails, that doesn't have SQL injection in it. Well, by default, no. But with all those custom things that are written into it, you can create conditions that previously didn't exist in ways that the framework wasn't expecting. So that's a framework is that it's a frame, and whatever you put in it, that's where it can be. It can still, the window can still be broken out of the frame. And so when we look at exactly what happened with struts, so there was each of these are CVE numbers that were released and indicate a type exploit for Apache struts. So starting in March of 2017, the most critical and easy to exploit one was released, and followed up by about 3 more of less severity. So basically that just means if you're an attacker using this would have the highest chance of success, and then it will go down the list. And the updating process for a lot of enterprises is very, very slow. So by the time an enterprise hears about this vulnerability, they're going to have to redo their entire website, and then essentially they're going to get hacked in that cadence. And then we go through here. This is essentially an example of one of the tools. You get the link later of how to actually test your own website for it. And there's also a Metasploit module available for it. And there's a big misconception on web application firewalls as well, that they'll protect vulnerable code. They're not. They're going to detect signatures of attack attempts, but there's always ways to get around them. And all information security technologies are signature based. Anyway, and if you can evade the signature, you will evade the technology. And then when it comes to different types of network attacks, so as we talked about the 3 steps of hacking, the most common protocols that are attacked are FTP, SSH, essentially all the most common office sharing type protocols, and are attacked through network things. And as an example of these types of exploits, the Eternal Blue and Double Pulsar attacks, which were used for the WannaCry ransomware, those were attacks on a network port. So the WannaCry ransomware campaign was based off of a propagating worm that was hitting SMB, which was using hijacked code from the NSA in the form of Eternal Blue. And then recently, we're starting to see a rash of IoT type attacks, specifically on GPON routers and other devices. But so
I'm sure we've heard about the FBI asking to reboot your routers, right?
And here's an example of all the IP, well, just a list of IP addresses that were infected with the Double Pulsar NSA backdoor. Basically, a couple weeks before WannaCry took advantage of the situation, but basically 3 out of 10 IP addresses were already infected on the entire internet.
When we asked the question of, well, how do you know, like, where that slide come from? That's because we actively scan the internet looking for things.
Yeah,
that's the business we're in.
Yeah, and so it's part of the basically mapping.
Scary.
Yeah, mapping the internet, seeing what comes back, and if it matches an infection pattern, flagging it. And so so when it comes to IoT, Cisco anticipates that by 2020 there will be 50 billion IoT devices. So we just kind of do the numbers on that. 1% of that of the 50 billion will be about 500 million exploitable targets. So that's a lot of targets to be able to start taking advantage of. And so the more IoT, that means the more pivots into the network. So if you're attacking a webcam or a printer, it's not necessarily the main objective of the attacker. It's what's behind the firewall with that device. So it's essentially acting as an entry point, so pinhole through the firewall that they can access things that might not be publicly accessible. And the attack would be, they log in through a weak telnet, they enable a more secure protocol, and then they'll tunnel in and start attacking what's behind the network. And we did and as one of our global IPv4 scans, we did a mapping of every single port 23, which is telnet. And telnet's a protocol that was invented in 1969. It's still used today, and it's even more popular than ever now because of IoT.
It's also clear text, there's no encryption on it.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most basic types of connections available, and it's not recommended to use for production systems for these reasons. So we scanned the entire internet, and we found, I just wanted to see what type of medical stuff was out there. A very simple search, the word medical on telnet. So we found a whole bunch of stuff, specifically things like these model numbers. When we researched them, we found out that they're widgets that are putting things on the internet that previously weren't on the internet. Old medical equipment that never had an internet connection now does because of the inclusion of these bits of hardware. And they'll identify the hospital right on there. I blacked out the names, but see medical clinic, medical group, medical center. And each one of these is using either a legacy router or some type of a new device that'll take old infrastructure and put it on the internet. And here's an example of a hospital's FTP server, an iHospital's FTP server. Blocked out the city of it, and it's again no encryption, legacy protocol sitting on the public internet. If it's there's most likely patient data in there, it's because it's a hospital server. And if it hasn't been exploited yet, it probably will be in the future because it's an FTP server. And some of the only security that we're seeing on these devices are the strongly worded warning messages saying if you log into this or if you violate the laws or our policies, we're going to prosecute you.
Good place to start, though. A lot of companies don't even have that. So it's a good place to
Indeed,
start.
like it's definitely it'll definitely scare away ethical researchers, but automated bots are going to they're not really going to pay too much attention to that. And as we talked about before, it's more than just printers and routers. So it can be everything from small Alexas and webcams going all the way up to industrial systems, with power plants and the like. And smart cities are just mesh networks of all these different types of technologies.
So in your home environment, just think for a moment, right? It's a quick run for everybody wants Alexa, everybody wants a device in their house that can talk to and have more friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what happens with those devices? They're communicating outbound, right? It's a device internally that's communicating outbound. When you're able to go ahead and manipulate DNS for those devices, you can make those devices talk to me. And then at that point, I'll pass the communication on to wherever it needs to go. So as people go ahead and get in the data stream of these devices, you're seeing more and more of that. When we have the FBI advising people to reboot their routers, that would be because people are jumping into routers and causing DNS redirection. These problems are prolific. You don't hear a lot about some of the endpoints as to what's actually happening. But if you're researching and figuring out how to make your devices do different things, you'll find interesting ways to control those devices.
And one of the main vectors of attack for these, again, they're not necessarily exploits. They're just default passwords or no passwords. They're just connecting in. And when we kind of see an example of where things get more heavy when it comes to these type of IoT devices, we see the parking infrastructure for a smart city, and we see the control panels for various. This is a solar panel facility. This is a chemical manufacturing plant, and this is a fuel processing plant. And we did a bit of research to figure out who these companies were, and we got them fixed up. But these were websites just sitting on the internet. They didn't know it was on the internet. There was no password. You can just type the IP address in, and now you're at the control panel for this facility. We also found we had found a dam as well, a hydroelectric dam. And every time we called, they're like, "Oh, that's online. It shouldn't be."
I had a gas station in Rockaway, New Jersey, where I live, and I had to go there and tell the guy that this was a problem, and if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to change my gas price to 99 cents. And he said, "Try it." And then I proved to him that his controls were inadequate to protect it because his third party that he used to control his gas pricing was doing it remotely with very poor authentication.
Wow. And with these, they just have no authentication. We found these because we were just looking for websites on port 80 that have the word SCADA in them. And then these bubbled up to the top as things that weren't normal websites but had the word SCADA.
What's also wrong with port 80 is it's clear text protocol.
It's essentially the regular, it's HTTP, regular internet. And so we even found a dam with a big red button, and you push the button, the doors open. We asked them, and they said, "Oh yeah, don't push that button," and we didn't. But they fixed it up. But but essentially that just shows how much the paradigm has changed, especially when it comes to so all of these systems here are a result of there's like 5 or 6 different companies that are in charge of different areas of this, and no one's responsible for the security of it because everyone's responsible for the security of it and just assuming the other person's taking care of it. So these interconnected networks provide a new vector of attack, harkening back to the concept of the paradigm shift. And now with the release of the NSA attack tools and even all these databases, low-level actors or script kiddies, they now have military-grade cyber weapons and databases that give them kind of the same type of lookup capabilities as the NSA did maybe 10 years ago or so, because now they've got these documents plus the attack scripts. And when it comes to the weakest link, it's usually within the digital supply chain. There's the second, third, or fourth tier network. Someone along that line is the weakest link, and that's what's causing the attacks. And what we suggest people do to mitigate the risk of external vulnerabilities impacting your enterprise is the process of continuous monitoring. So as we explained, we're doing constant mappings of every single IP address on the internet, and then the security scorecard platform will map them in and attribute them to the company. And we're doing everything in the hacking procedures, but we're stopping short of attempting to gain access or send any malicious code. We're essentially doing the reconnaissance and then matching to vulnerabilities and reporting it. So there are solutions like us that do that, and it's just you have to continuously monitor because so pen tests are good, but they're point in time, and what you really need are 2 combinations. You need continuous monitoring to be able to see what's accessible, what's exposed, what's available, and then you have manual teams going in to actually verify, find it, and then close stuff out and respond to the issues.
And that's exactly where we come together, right? Having the passive analysis is listening, having the active analysis is actually breaking. So you put those 2 things together, you have a combination of understanding what your risks are, perhaps any of your third-party risk, maybe down-level merchants or vendors that you work with, but then being able to actively take a assessive action, be able to prove that the problem is real, is really where the meat meets, where it meets the road, right? People go, oh my God, look at what was able to be happening.
And this is probably one of the most important takeaways from today as well. Basically, everyone's going to be experiencing a breach incident, and people shouldn't be shamed or the news is terrible about doing that, about shaming companies after they've experienced an incident. But everyone's going to experience it because the bigger the company is, the more spinning wheels they're going to have. Something's going to happen. What measures the winners from the losers is how fast do you respond and mitigate potential fallout and respond to the incident to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that also kind of harkens back to our previous speaker who spoke about business continuity practices. But it's going to happen. It's just a matter of are you prepared for it and how do you respond. And so when it comes to the technicals of being able to ensure due diligence, and ensuring applications are up to date, related infrastructure is all secured, basically that nothing is hanging out there with no passwords or old versions. And the concept of the secure development lifecycle for internal development teams goes a very long way. But you want to touch on that at all?
Sure. So it's one thing to build. It's one thing to build a house with a bunch of wood and try your best to make it stand up at night without falling down. But having a robust platform that's not only resilient but also has safety in mind from a software perspective, it really takes it takes a process to build tools. It's a process to build product. It's a process to build everything, quite frankly. And whether it be in a very deployable model, the DevOps effort of people building this to deployment. I run a SaaS platform. Penteston is my tool. When I run that tool and I go ahead and do code drops on the weekend or whatever it may be, that happens. But you still have to be able to stage, be able to do regression testing, and testing throws out the door. So whether it be a small team or a very large organization, an SDLC process is really important to have a definition of how software is built and how it's measured.
And because again, development teams, they're concentrating on making the software work. They have a deadline. Writing software is hard, and they want to make sure they have a product to deliver. Security is usually an afterthought, and having security built into the software development lifecycle program, it's better to solve the problems before they take place than to try to play whack-a-mole afterwards. And yeah, so it's also important to again maintaining teams that can actually conduct these vulnerability assessments and actually go in and start kicking the tires. And then for the standpoint of continuous monitoring and automated solutions, you can sign up to monitor. Basically, you pull your company's security scorecard report free and instant from instant.securityscorecard.com. And you want to dig deeper into the findings and really start hitting them and exploiting them, definitely check out pentest.com.
So the other area of how to be better, how to be smarter, is a product we worked on. I worked on with the Center for Internet Security called the Top 10 Controls. The Top 10 Controls started as a small area and then expanded to what was now called the CIS Top 20, which then SANS has adopted as their Top 20 as well. But I can't say, I can say with a lot of organizations that I get brought into, and I kind of walk through this model really slowly with them and say, let's go ahead and take a look at what your hygiene is. The first 5 items here are the most important. They're the most important out of the 20. And when you sit down with an organization, you ask them for asset inventories, what they own, and what they have. You'd be surprised how many of them can't put an answer to that paper within 24 hours. How many devices does your organization currently have under management? And do you know the IP ranges, the devices, the models, the types? You have an inventory. It's a struggle for many organizations. Just about 90% that I walk into, and they're big and small. Some of my biggest clients have 345,000 employees around the world. Some of my smallest clients are law firms with 300 attorneys here in the state of New Jersey, and they can't get step 1 correct, which is scary. Step 2, an inventory of authorized and unauthorized software. If you don't know what should be running in the organization and you haven't been able to identify what's supposed to run in the business, so you can take this business as an example, if you don't know what software you're licensed for, what you have, you'll never know when there's an advisory that says there's a problem, where to fix it. You don't even know you have it. Again, not having an inventory of your assets is really, really a big problem. Number 3, a secure configuration for any hardware or software. We talked about default passwords, we talked about default configs. We all know things like firmware goes out of date. But being able to have an understanding as to what the organization has. Hey, we have a bunch of things that blink and a bunch of technology stuff, but we don't know anything about it. We may even have some printers and devices that were deployed with default configurations that don't have any names and passwords on them. So anyone that connects to the network might be able to log on there with admin no password. It might be able to redirect faxes and redirect photocopies. All these things are just kind of interesting and funny, but it goes back to secure configuration. If you can't prove it, you're going to get bit real quick. Number 4, continuous vulnerability assessment. Well, we just touched on a couple of things like pen testing and testing. I say it's like healthcare. You have to have a general practitioner. You have to have a doctor you go to see once a year. And it should be internal to your company. It should be people that you trust inside your business that can do a fair amount of security to understand that, yes, what's our health? Are we an A, B, C, D, E, F? Where are we? If you don't have those people, if you're a complete outsourced team and you want to do everything in the cloud, that's fine. You better bring in a third-party firm to make sure that you have some readiness. If you don't do that, you're going to be, what I would say, not showing due care, and that may actually lead to having liability in the event of having problems with your customers or data. Because if you can't prove due care, somebody might not, in a court of law might say that you were not able to control the data you had use of. And lastly, controlled use of administrative privilege. This is known as PAM, Privilege Access Management, right? Everybody in the company has a basic account. They can do email, they can do phone stuff, they can do application stuff. That's cool. Everybody's kind of the same user level. When you have your IT folks that really have access to run systems, monitor, manage, etc., they should not be using the same account that they do their email and phone and applications on. They should not. I'll say it again. Privilege access management must be separated, must be logged, because without having change control, without having any way to audit and make sure that the right people have the right access to systems, you're opening yourself up to a problem. Go back to Jim's example. When you send someone an email and they click on a magic link that they don't have any controls for because they haven't been doing any of the stuff that I've just mentioned, well, perhaps that person that was targeted was the IT guy. And now the IT guy is clicking on the link with the privileges of God in your company, allowing that person to have access to anything he needs to go to. So right away, you've already determined that step 1 through 5, you're deficient and you've been owned because you haven't been able to get out of your way with the first 5 steps. So again, this is known as the CIS, or the Center for Internet Security Top 20. We put together really good guidance on a lot of these areas as to how to be better. You've noticed application security is number 18, so it's way down the list, but fairly important. And there's a lot of components here that people can use every single day. So again, it comes down to resources are available. People can't be forced to read stuff. but if you're responsible to help influence that decision, it's a good place to start. We've also put together a bunch of other resources that will be available on the PDF. Items that were pointed out earlier are going to be useful as well. But whether it be scanning tools or free security reports or OWASP resources, or even the New Jersey State Police resources, which are fantastic. There's a conversation here about figuring out who's responsible in your organization. Make sure they have what they need, including the training and the time. And when they don't have the training or don't have the time, it's not your job to throw more stuff on their plate, quite frankly, to try to help get them more resources. Because this is something that everyone has a play with. So with that, here's my contact information as well as Alex's. Be happy to take any questions as part of a roundtable. But certainly, I think any pointed questions about our experiences might help you because again, it's sort of free consulting. So, any questions?
Are we getting a copy of this also?
Yes, ma'am. The slides are available in PDF as well as Robert, can you bring up the other slide, the other tab? I also worked on scroll down a little bit. So I worked on a project. Scroll down. Yeah. Go to the top. Okay, so I worked on a project recently for the top consideration for incident response that James highlighted. I gave this to him too, so this is useful. But if you scroll to the very bottom, you'll see that this document will be another example. So all the stuff we've talked about relative to where we should be looking for threats and attack components, just go down to the end. There you go. So there's more references there, and then scroll to the last piece. And the last piece again has the people that help put this item together. But the material's available for us. And I think it's our job as members of the Morris County Economic Development Committee to help put together easy things that people can use tomorrow and be able to say, hey, your 2,100 businesses, whatever it is in Morris County, big and small, they all have the same issues. And the idea is trying to figure out where they score and where they rank, and have them collaborate, have them share, and not share, collaborate on intellectual property, of course. We want people to participate in a meaningful way. And that makes our county better. And that's really what we should be focused on. Then we can help our individual businesses prosper. So that was the answer to your question. Sorry to so long.
Thank you.
Yes?
Well, I think this is a huge new thing, especially for a lot of bigger companies. But can you speak a little bit to cloud security?
Sure. I think everybody's running, most organizations that I've worked with, big and small, are running to a shared services model because of cost reduction. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that I agree with a shared services model for cost reduction. I even have a tool that's in the cloud, right? The nice part about that is that you get what you're paying for, or that the organization is paying a lesser fee. They're deferring some of their liability, or not even their liability, they're deferring some of their control. And at that point, they need to be relying on the back-end providers, whoever they may be. It could be a company like New York Internet here in New York City and in New Jersey. It could be a company like Azure, Microsoft Azure. It could be AWS. It could be whatever. But the concept is at what level do we run to the cloud? Then, as we go there, the number one problem that I'm seeing, at least from an attacker's perspective, is organizations have implemented Office 365 as an example, and also Google Apps and other components, without considering what that means to me, the attacker, when I'm in that mode. Because your employees are putting things up in the cloud with directories that are unsecured. And it's very easy to get keys to the kingdom to organizations that are using current technology at their desktop, when their businesses have no understanding as to what CASB controls are at all, or be able to do document tagging and tracking. Right? So putting stuff up in the cloud is not an answer without being controlled. And many organizations have fallen victim to, let me lower my costs, let me move to the cloud, let's start using everything up there. And that's a great opportunity for bad guys to get to data, which is really what they're looking for. They're looking for data.
And yeah, on the same note of basic cloud security, it would kind of fall into basically the ecosystem model, because it's a distributed system that employees have the ability to choose what services they're going to use sometimes, and that's if it's easy for you to access, it's probably also easy for an attacker to access.
I've looked at organizations recently that their enterprise organizations, departments have moved to S3 buckets, Amazon doing things, and the S3 buckets themselves are not secure. So as an attacker, it's not what's in the bucket for me, it's that everything is in the bucket. And now I have the bucket. And then I can go ahead and walk in the door and say, yeah, so I have the entire company, here's a copy of it. And they go like, well, what department? No, everybody, like the whole company. What do you mean? Well, because somebody in this department decided it would be cool to spin up an AWS instance, and then have the entire marketing communications data all put in one place, and then launch campaigns from it, spin up applications, and oh yeah, let's move the HR database there. It's easy because the IT guys are paid to buy. Like some of the crazy stuff that happens, to your point, it's just missing it. So when you have the health check, the general practitioner, the doctor, the person that's going to help you stay safe and stay secure, it's a matter of having trust in the people that work for your company.
I mean that's a perfect example of basing databases with no passwords.
There you go.
That's
Just take the whole database.
Yeah, and but hope that answers.
Yeah, thank you.
And then your point before, your question before this session around social engineering, right? I mean, the trend that I'm seeing right now is people jumping on the bandwagon of using tools that send out emails like, hey, click on this. People are always going to click on stuff. I click on stuff every day. So do you, right? So that is not a good measurement of security awareness. It's not. It should be used as a mechanism to help drive a program and drive a business process. But the concept of saying, hey, let me go in and spin up a particular widget and send emails that people are going to click on, then let me smack those people with a stick and say, oh, you're bad, you have to take an hour-long training class because you clicked on a link. Completely ineffective. It doesn't really work. It's good for the marketing of the company that's selling you the tool. It's probably good for the IT guy who's used to saying no to people, but it doesn't help the culture of the company get better at all. And I think that's an important factor. Like working with controls that'll help identify and screen malicious links ahead of time and help a customer focus on doing his job. Like people want security to be the brakes on the car. They don't want it to be the car, right? They don't want to know it's there. They just want to know that you're doing your job while I do my job, which is processing mortgages or saving kittens or whatever I'm into. And I think that's the important part, is trying to make sure that people focus on how they can help, not hamper the business.
So like benchmarking the overall security awareness of a company, I guess you would use like the health assessments, kind of like the pen test, the vulnerability assessments, instead of like, oh, this person's 3.5% fish prone.
I think I would probably agree with that. I think the passive analysis is a good place to start. Where do you score in general health of your industry, and then both inside and outside. What do your people score, maybe by department, because you need to go ahead and get a metric and a baseline. But calling out Mary in accounting because you clicked on stuff, I don't know that that's very valuable to the big picture. We want people to be able to stop people coming through the door with no badges. You want people to help report stuff. They shouldn't be feeling their jobs in jeopardy every time they click on something. It makes them powerless. They don't do stuff. It becomes, they don't take risks. You don't take risks, you're not in business. That's how it works. So it's concerning.
One of the measurements that we do at Security Scorecard for the assessment of social engineering is where so we can't actually be actively phishing users or anything, but what we'll do is we'll look at marketing data feeds for basically high-risk type advertisements, adult dating sites, supplements, things that people normally shouldn't be ordering from work with their work emails. And when we find corporate accounts on there, it's a higher indication that they're more susceptible to social engineering, because those lists are coming off of email spam businesses. And so we find that kind of by looking at where corporate email addresses surface in basically strange to quote unquote high risk consumer areas, it could indicate that that individual just might need a little more training on how to what's okay and what's not okay to do with the corporate account.
Got it.
Yeah. So that's why we've been successful, is giving organizations sort of their health score, saying, hey, here's what we look at. It's a passive, non-intrusive analysis. And when they fail miserably and they're getting a big F on the report card, I mean, everybody who has kids in the room, they know what the report cards are, right? Here's what you've done quarter by quarter. Here's your room for improvement. If you can't give somebody sort of that scorecard or report card, you can't ever get better. Like there's no way to measure, and that's what it's all about. The only people that care about measuring are the folks that actually want to see progress. Right?
You can't fix what you can't see.
Agreed. So great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.